Greetings. Welcome to Chapter 9 of Introduction to Art, entitled Art and Power. Let's get going. So I wanted to change the format of this a little bit and show you what the sections of the chapter are in this slide. The first part is the learning outcomes, the introduction to the chapter itself, the section on propaganda, persuasion, politics, and power, and then finally the imagery of war. So instead of talking specifically about the learning outcomes, I thought I would try some questions that you can pose to yourself when you're reading this chapter. So what sort of power do art and artists have over us? What's the difference between persuasion and propaganda? How is art used to convey power, influence society, and effect change? How do leaders use art to enhance their position and authority? How has the depiction of conflict and heroic action changed in different societies? And we could say over time, of course. And why have certain images been prohibited or destroyed in certain cultures at various times? So, propaganda, persuasion, politics, and power. Now, there's an interesting distinction between propaganda and persuasion, and I'll read this to you. Propaganda is the deliberate, systematic attempt to shape perceptions, manipulate cognitions, and direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. Persuasion is interactive and attempts to satisfy the needs of both persuader and persuadee. So here's an example, and our textbook does a really nice job of distinguishing between King Darius the First's attempts at propaganda, a kind of overpowering statement of this of this palace room, and the persuasion aspect. The persuasion aspect has to do with showing people on these friezes. That's the kind of mural type. It's a carved stone mural, so to speak, showing people from different parts of his huge empire sort of working together in a unified manner. So he wasn't just trying to scare people with this impressive building with its kind of oppressive presence, in a sense, or grand presence, but he was trying to show how everyone could work together and then the king could get his way, right? And I should explain this 19th century reconstruction on the left-hand side. I believe that refers just to the drawing itself, not that it was actually reconstructed on site, but that does give you an idea of what it would have looked like at the time of its creation. An amazing structure. Then we have Jacques-Louis David's painting, Napoleon crossing the Alps. The funny thing about this, as our textbook talks about, Napoleon wasn't in the vanguard. He didn't really lead his troops. He followed across the Alps a few days after they had already gone, and he rode a mule in nice weather, not a steed in stormy weather like this. But this is an example of a leader projecting a kind of power and vitality that's meant to influence the viewer. Whether, I mean, I guess this is both propaganda and persuasion in the sense that it conveys a certain image of Napoleon as the virile young leader, right? But it's not. I don't know how much this is meant to intimidate other people, but I'm sure it would a little bit. And here we have an example that's not in our textbook that I wanted to share with you, or not in this chapter in the textbook. And it's Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres' Napoleon on his imperial throne. So just 5 or so years after the painting on horseback, we have Napoleon with the trappings of the imperial ruler of France and his empire. Notice this different sort of means that the artist has used to convey Napoleon's power. In a sense, I would say this is more propagandistic because of the way that Napoleon is shown as this sort of authoritarian ruler, let's say, and kind of omnipotent. There are all sorts of references to ancient Greek and Roman cultures in this painting that is considered a neoclassical painting. So it harkens back to the glories of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It's sort of so Napoleon can tap into the kind of power that the Greeks and Romans project. And I just wanted to contrast these depictions of power. So young on the left, young and on the rearing horse, the bold leader, and on the right, the sort of omnipotent and in a way omniscient ruler, right? Who sort of knows everything that you're doing as if he were Zeus on his throne on Mount Olympus. So the imagery of war has changed over time, and our book again does a really nice um, overview of these changes, the different methods that that rulers say use to depict the glories of war, as in this palette of King Narmer. Palette in the sense I believe it was meant for mixing makeup, face makeup. So the palette of King Narmer here shows him victorious over his enemies. Notice the large scale of the king on the left-hand panel. This is two sides of the same panel palette, as you probably figured out. He's showing about that he's about to kill one of his enemies. And notice how large he is compared to everything else. Next, we have Emanuel Leutze's Washington crossing the Delaware. Apparently not particularly historically accurate, a really interesting painting. I suppose propagandistic in the sense that it shows Washington as the sort of invincible fearless leader. But of course, this was painted long after Washington's death. So in a way, it's meant as a bit of, I think, what we call Americana now, right? It's meant to show the formation of the nation and the bravery of deeds done at that time. But the perils of war here, we don't have a brutal battle. We have the prelude to a battle. Here we have the aftermath of the battle. Photography altered the way war was depicted. Our book talks about photographs could be reproduced in newspapers by the First World War. It was technologically not possible prior to that, apparently. This photograph by Alexander Gardner from 1862 shows dead Confederate soldiers. He was a Northerner. I'm not sure whether he would have depicted dead Union soldiers in the same way. Note that action photographs were not possible during the Civil War. People had to be still, as in dead, or I think I've got a picture of, oh wait, the textbook has a picture of Lincoln standing still. So everything would have to be posed. This does show the brutal side of war, and this becomes more typical of war photography over time. But also painting became more sort of realistic in the sense that it showed the dark side of war as time goes on, closer to our own time. But if we go back a little bit to 1814, 1815, when Goya painted this painting, we see that his view of war is already the sort of more modern version where it shows a dark side of what we might call the non-victorious. So iconoclasm, iconomachy, and iconophobia. Iconoclasm literally means the destruction of images. Iconomachy, bonus word, this means a war against images. And then iconophobia is the fear of images. Iconoclasm is the general term. People sometimes use it incorrectly in the sense that it literally means, like I said, the smashing of images. People use it to mean these other things too. It's just become a general term. So we have two different versions here. Our textbook makes a distinction between religious iconoclasm, as in the Protestant Reformation, in Holland here, where statues were damaged and other images were damaged by mobs. And then on the left-hand side, the statue of Saddam Hussein being destroyed after the US invasion of Iraq. So one is political, or the political on the left, and then religious on the right. But you might say both stem from a kind of intent to make a statement. On the right, the political statement is that the ruler is no longer in power. I'm sorry, on the left. The right-hand side, it's a statement against religious imagery. The idea of at least some in the Protestant Reformation was that images were distracting the worshiping public from what they should be doing. And so this attack on images was meant as a kind of purification. Well, thanks for joining me. This was a very short slideshow. I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to Chapter 9 of Introduction to Art. Thank you.